Hello and welcome to Second Look from the heart of a blustery Liverpool. I am Neil Atkinson, and these two, with me, Reddy and Blundell, have braved the wind, and it did take some braving, and got themselves into the office today to talk to us about Liverpool versus Paris Saint-Germain last night. And where I want to start with this, Mel, is Liverpool left out £100 million worth of midfield talent last night and went with the three lads that played the Champions League final. And I think that when you look at the numbers, what struck me was the similarity in terms of where they were doing the passing, the sort of passes they were, where they were on the pitch to carry these sorts of instructions out. And one of the things that struck me about that is all three of them play as midfielders. It's not like there's a defined role. One's more attacking, one's more defensive. Yeah. And I think that's why maybe we didn't see Firmino and Keita last night, is that he's not asking a lot of his midfielders, Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, we've mentioned it so many times. They have to be all-encompassing, strong in the tackle. They've got to be controllers. They've got to get stuck in when necessary, but be smart when necessary. And there's so many things going on. Interestingly, post-match, he mentioned why he decided to go with them, because they are in tune with each other. They know exactly what is required in this sort of game, on this sort of stage. And you can see why he's thought that is a more intelligent option than going with Keita, who is more dynamic than any of the three he started, or Firmino, who's more pedigreed and technically better, especially in the defensive sense. And that midfield three were absolutely astounding in all respects last night. The victory and, the scoreline belies what actually happens on the pitch, because in all facets of the game, Liverpool were superior. And that was born out of how sensational the midfield three were.
In all facets of the game, Liverpool was superior, Phil. And what strikes me about that midfield three up against the Paris Saint-Germain midfield three is, for instance, lads like Rabiot are much vaunted. And what we always end up doing is we end up saying, Liverpool have out-battled them. What we should just be saying is Liverpool's players are better. I think Liverpool's players can walk off that pitch last night and not be thinking, well, we out-fought them or we out-battled them. They should just be able to walk off and go, we are just superior to these footballers right now.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of talk about us looking at Rabiot as an option to sign next summer. And is he honest? I know it's a bit lazy to say after one game he's not better than them, but if he was going to be good enough for us, you'd expect him to walk into Anfield, have a bit of a swagger about him and do something that makes you think, yeah, all right, he'll do for me. But I didn't see anything last night against that midfield, and I don't even think that midfield is theoretically at what in 6 months' time will be viewed as anything close to our strongest midfield. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if two of those, if Wijnaldum and Milner sort of their roles are sort of lessened as the season goes.
They will fade out of contention and someone else comes in. And
I think there's like a periodisation thing where we've gone in, start of the season, because the three, not Henderson admittedly, but we've played, 6 games now, and the four games have been Wijnaldum, Keita and Milner. They were all in pre-season before the World Cup were finished. Yeah. So you're able to get a plan in place, you're able to get them, right, you do this, bang, bang, bang. And by the time you know it, it's the second international break, which is in 2.5 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we've done 8 league games, and you've not really used Henderson a great deal. You've not used Firmino a great deal, and you're able to sort of go, this is what we're getting out of them now. And then later in the season, you've talked about Ferguson doing this quite a lot, and that looks to be what we're doing with the midfield. And the thing is, there's a level of familiarity with this one as well. They know exactly what they're doing. You can put Henderson in a bit easier. I think if you'd have put sort of 2 of Henderson, Firmino and Keita in, it gets a little bit sort of, Keita's not quite up to the system, and Henderson isn't quite up to speed fitness-wise. He looked sharper last night, and I thought he looked sharper when he came on Saturday, but very much before the international break, he wasn't quite there, and you could tell he was still going through a phase of getting back into the swing of things.
The point of envy is a great one, looking at other teams or looking around Europe and being besotted with these names. And Jurgen Klopp, I think it was like 2 transfer windows ago, said he doesn't look at other teams and is jealous of what they have. He knows what he has, and he hopes it gets to a point where supporters realise what a great team Liverpool have, with a great set of players. And at Anfield, there were moments when I was looking at Gini Wijnaldum and I was like, this is some player. Yeah. This is some player magnificent at everything, really. Shielding the ball, carrying the ball, being efficient with it, and just thinking his way through a game so well that if that was an opposition player putting in that performance at Anfield with some fancy name, or, you know, if that was Rabia, for example, you know, people would be going absolutely wild for it. And it wasn't just him. I thought, you know, James Milner is defying just everything at the moment. And Jordan Henderson, I mean, you know, gets a lot of grief, but it was a titanic performance from him as well yesterday, especially since, you know, we take for granted the fact that he did come back later than everyone else, and he did have to play catch-up. But I think he has, and Jurgen Klopp specifically mentioned him yesterday, and I think he did that to both raise why he hasn't started yet, and to also introduce the fact that he will be using Henderson a lot more now.
To talk about the way in which they think their way through the game, Mel, I think that's a really interesting point. That's what they do. And in there, I thought you saw it the 10 minutes after we go 1-0, in that it's as though the three of them decide we are not letting them out of their own half until they give us a second goal. Yeah. And the three of them, I thought, especially Henderson, but the other two as well, they just decide, almost like they've clicked a switch and they've gone, we're just penning these back. It was almost like a training ground exercise. PSG could not get out, and they were just not going to be allowed to get out until they gave that second goal to Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? There was a stage where it felt like if Liverpool really hit the right spots here, it could be 5.
It felt like it could be Roman again.
Yeah, before PSG could blink, they'd be well and truly out of the tie. There were moments, and Jamie Carragher was sitting in front of me in the press box, and you'd even see him. You know, this is a man who knows this atmosphere, who's seen these type of games before, who's, you know, been involved in such games, and even he was puffing his cheeks out at what Liverpool were doing to this PSG side. And there were moments where they looked so lost for not just ideas, but any way to escape. I mean, you saw Neymar hitting the ball straight to Alisson. You know, they were giving it out of touch often. You saw Trent Alexander-Arnold thinking he was Mbappe and salaming through into the box. So I think PSG knew to expect that, right? Thomas Tuchel knew Liverpool would do that, knew Liverpool capable of doing that. He's experienced that firsthand before. But knowing all those things and planning for it and then actually dealing with it is two different things. And PSG were very, very lucky last night that it didn't all go Liverpool's way, because if it did, it could have been very ugly for them.
Could have been ugly for them. What they also, Mel's right to say, you've got to experience this occasionally. You can plan for it, you can have the meetings, you can talk about the crowd, you can talk about what Liverpool do. You've got to experience it. But Liverpool have experienced it, and that's the other thing. You get the impression now watching these players, Phil, watching Milner, watching Henderson, watching Wijnaldum, they've lived a Liverpool dominant half. So they knew when Liverpool went 1-0 up, it was as if they just knew. They know what they knew. This is now what we do.
There's a piece in the Guardian, Jonathan Wilson's written this morning. It basically, the headline is this isn't Tuchel football, it's not even football. Yeah. It's something along those lines. And they're not playing in the identity of what their manager wants them to do, or what their manager's history in football is, where this Liverpool team is the complete opposite of that. And it is, to the letter, what the manager wants out of every single player, at the right place, the right time. It's so well coached, so well organised, so well set up. It's incredible to watch how players who, natural ability-wise, Wijnaldum was all right at Newcastle. Milner was almost a Manchester City cast-off. That's not harsh to say. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a Manchester City cast-off. But these weren't, when we got them, top-level footballers. And they are now top-level footballers, and it is incredible to see. I personally have had issues with Milner in central midfield, and to be honest, I've got no interest in watching James Milner at home to Southampton in midfield on Saturday. I just don't want to see that. I would quite happily not have him play. But games like PSG, games like Spurs away, it's exactly what you want from a footballer.
It is exactly what you want from a footballer, indeed. Let's hand over now to some bespectacled fella who thinks he knows it all to talk on the tactics board. It was a triumph of shape. It was a triumph of people knowing their jobs. It was a triumph of a manager taking a little bit of a risk and trusting his 19-year-old right back. But it was a triumph for Liverpool against Paris Saint-Germain. 3-2 flattered the French side in the end. And what we saw through the game was it's very, 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 very hard to be Roberto Firmino. And I think that's worth remembering. We take so much of what Firmino does for granted as Liverpool supporters. We think that because he works that hard, all number 9 should work that hard. But that's nonsense. It was nonsense when it was Ian Rush, and it's nonsense now. But all the way through the game, Daniel Sturridge was really, really clever. He took awareness of his surroundings. You could see him looking all the time as to where he was meant to be. He's probably never thought about a match as much as he thought about this one. He was desperate to get his goal, yes, but he has a set of tactical instructions. And you could see he was trying to block off the route into the defensive midfielder, but simultaneously at times also look to stop them from playing down this flank, look to stop them getting to Di Maria, because Di Maria would then want to get it to Neymar. And then this organisation comes, and Liverpool's midfield 3, as we're talking about, they play as a midfield 3. There isn't really a pure designated holder. They've got different jobs, they do slightly different things, but they both all played in a line so high up. At times you even saw Henderson going right the way into the forward line and pressing along here. He doesn't play all the way back here, and that could be why we haven't seen much of Fabinho yet, because that's where Fabinho wants to be. Liverpool backed themselves. They knew Neymar wouldn't track. They knew that before a ball was even kicked, and you got to see that all the way through the game. They knew that Mbappe would be a little bit reluctant as well. And a lot of what we've talked about with sides doing to us, Leicester, Tottenham, what they've attempted to do to stop us, we were doing a little bit of that as well, ensuring the ball couldn't get to these players. Not so much the idea of them taking it off them. A couple of times you saw Neymar and Mbappe run away from Liverpool players, but Liverpool stopped them from getting the ball. But it all stemmed from the front. It all stemmed from Sturridge. And he's not going to run for you like Firmino does. He's probably not even going to be as tactically, innately intelligent as Firmino endlessly manages. But if anything, that makes the achievement all the greater. It makes the 70 minutes he puts in all the better. He had to be at his sharpest, at his best, and at his brightest. And really, across that 70 minutes, he was. My original plan was to come in with a change of clothes and do the 2 bits looking completely different. But I just didn't have the opportunity this morning. I had to run the dentist after getting in at 3 o'clock last night. Back with Mel and Phil to talk about that game. And it was billed, Mel, as the battle of the front threes. We're going to find out who's the best front 3 in Europe. Front 3 this, front 3 that. Well, first of all, Sturridge starts and Firmino doesn't. But actually, when Liverpool win the game, is the midfielders, as we discussed before, and arguably the 2 fullbacks. That the way PSG approached the game gave the 2 fullbacks real opportunity to demonstrate their class, their quality. You know, you'd have thought we would end this talking about Salah, Mane. Firmino doesn't miss, they get the last-minute winner, but instead you're left talking about those midfield 3 and those fullbacks, both of whom were excellent.
Yeah, I thought Trent Alexander-Arnold in particular, I thought both of them had a brilliant game. But in terms of the context of PSG thinking, okay, we're going to play Neymar on the left to try and exploit Trent, because Jurgen Klopp needs his fullback to go and join the attack and to be an outlet there. Neymar doesn't really defend, so he's going to maximise every opportunity when that ball breaks to try and hurt Trent and catch him out. The inverse happens in that Trent basically runs most of the game. He's got the most touches. Nobody makes as many tackles as him. We spoke about that mad run that he has. Yeah. He's involved. His cross just evades Mane, ends up at Andy Robertson, who then delivers a spectacular ball for Daniel Sturridge. But if you look all the way through the game, Trent is involved everywhere. And that's, Liverpool, where PSG looked to hurt Liverpool, Jurgen Klopp and the team itself had faith to think, no, this 19-year-old, he's going to hurt you guys. Yeah. And they both had really difficult challenges. I mean, you've got Mbappe and Meunier on the one side, and you had Di Maria pulling off to work in that half space and to assist Neymar. And I mean, this is a teenager and a guy that came from Hull that had zero fanfare. And this is, again, the thing we speak about envy. These are really, really good players doing a really great job in a very, very important game. And we saw how dangerous PSG could be on the counter. But I thought Liverpool dealt with them phenomenally. They end up conceding 2 goals. Again, I will say, don't think the scoreline is a reflection of what we saw yesterday. But the full-backs and the two centre-backs dealt really well with everything that PSG tried to throw at them.
The system's a high wire act, Phil, and I think, for instance, you saw when you looked at the average position second half away at Leicester, you see the extent to which Alexander-Arnold is left almost on his own for a long period until Shaqiri comes on. And you get to see last night, if you look at the average positions again, he's almost left at times to be a one-man right-hand side because Salah wants to cut inside, Salah wants to come central. He's not going to do that work coming back particularly. He did work hard last night, but he knows he's there for one thing, which is to be the attacking force. And I think when you're sort of aware of, I talked about Van Dijk's rectangle on the main show the other day, but the size of Trent Alexander-Arnold at the age of 19 is, lads, you've got to look after all this pitch. This is all your bit of pitch. And to do it with the calm that he does it is just phenomenal.
I mean, it's a serious level of responsibility for a 19-year-old, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you're looking at it thinking this is the kind of thing you want a seriously experienced footballer who's been around for 5 years playing in, doing what he did last season for nearly 10 years, and we've got him doing it after basically a year at right back, because he's not a right back either, really. He's learning the position as well, because he wasn't playing right back when he was 14, was he? Mm. So we've taken him, moulded him, getting him to do this, that and the other, but it's also about giving him that much space also is because we're trying to keep the ball, we're trying to basically keep the game compact in one area, and we know that if we get the ball onto feet, a player can spin someone and create space themselves. And then if that doesn't quite work, he's in so much space, you've got an out ball and you can shift things as well. And it works, doesn't it?
It does work, Mel, and I think that last night, as part of this, Phil says there, that he's not a fullback, but he's almost left to play the game a lot of the time like a midfielder.
Yeah.
And you can see the same with Robertson on the left. Robertson's stats on the left, I was working through them this morning, and he actually only puts 2 crosses in. Liverpool put, I think, 24 crosses in across the course of the game, but Robertson only puts 2 in. And when he first arrived, you would see him put cross after cross in. And now he almost plays more like a left midfielder. He's cunning, he wants to come inside, make a little run, drag a man, and that's what they play like. Even in a game like this, even in a game against Paris Saint-Germain, they're as much midfielders supplementing the 3 in there in the middle as they are fullbacks who've got to worry about what's going to happen behind them.
True. And, like we said as well, it's not just auxiliary midfielders as they are in terms of what they're asked to do and how they have to contribute. They're also an extension of the attack, like we mentioned, and it was interesting to see Andy Robertson only cross twice. One of which was freaking out. I mean, traditional centre forwards have dreams about that kind of ball. And
drop that in the right place, didn't he?
Yeah, and Trent had put in that cross as well for Sturridge, the second one, which I think Daniel would admit he should have done better with that header. But they were both. I think sometimes because Liverpool play so well, we can underestimate how much effort and how difficult the game actually was for them and what actually was the challenge facing them. We mentioned the players they had to contain. And I spoke to some of the PSG journalists before the game and after the game. And they had fears that PSG wouldn't be able to match Liverpool in terms of intensity and work rate and all the things that you need at this stage, because PSG aren't accustomed to that in League One. It's so easy for them, and when you look at the games they've played already in the campaign in France, sometimes they're operating at about 50% or just below, and they're still easing through games. But the other thing they said was PSG's front line will always get chances and will get loads of them, but the midfield and the defence aren't up to par with their front line. But Liverpool restricted them really well yesterday, and I think it ended up being Liverpool having something like 12 shots inside the box.
Yeah.
Double what PSG were able to do. And you spoke at the top of the show about it being billed as 2 of the best attacks in Europe. We lose sight of the fact that when Sadio Mane came in, when Roberto Firmino came in, when Mo Salah came in, no one were thinking, these 3 are going to amalgamate and become the most feared attack in Europe. Whereas PSG have spent, Neymar cost more than those 3 combined. That's even before you factor Mbappe's cost into the equation and Cavani. And those fullbacks, and I thought Joe Gomez again you know, we can't speak enough about how brilliant Joe Gomez is on the Anfield rep, but I thought again he was outstanding as well. And, you know, in that climate of what you're up against, just phenomenal.
Liverpool superior to Paris Saint-Germain. That is the takeaway. Should be the takeaway from the second look. Should be the takeaway from anyone who's watched that game of football last night. Liverpool 3, Paris Saint-Germain 2, and the scoreline was kind to them. Thank you very much to Mel. Thank you very much to Phil. See you next time.